Welcome everyone to our third and final Ignite Startup Workshop for the fall semester. I'm so excited to have those of you joining us today with us. My name is Amanda Golden and I'm the Assistant Director of the Herb Kelleher Entrepreneurship Center, where we promote the development of entrepreneurial skills and support the exploration of the ways these skills can be applied to careers as founders or innovators within established firms. Our Ignite Startup workshops provide an opportunity for students to learn more about different topics related to new venture creation. These workshops host leaders from various industries and on-campus experts and enable students, faculty, staff, and the greater Austin entrepreneurial community to gain usable skills and insights for launching an idea into a startup or pursuing other career opportunities. Today, we are excited to welcome Bart Bohn to provide an overview of common business models and evaluating models for your own startup. Throughout today's workshop, you can use the Q&A box to submit questions, and we will be taking questions from the audience in today's workshop. Bart is a serial entrepreneur in building entrepreneurship programs and his own occasional startups. In that journey, Bart founded 3-Day Startup to provide learning by doing entrepreneurship education programs to college students, ATI Water to reduce embedded water in agriculture, energy production, and manufacturing, Water Riot to get Internet of Things technologists to focus on our water infrastructure, SEAL, Student Entrepreneur Acceleration and Launch, to transition the most promising university-sourced startups to the mainstream startup ecosystem, and Build Sec Foundry to help veterans launch cybersecurity startups. His own startups were members of Techstars, Capital Factory, and Austin Technology Incubator. In all, startups he supported have gone on to raise over $1 billion in capital and already realized $800 million in exits. Bart, welcome and thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, man, it's good to be with you and everyone else.
All right, well, I will let you take it away.
Fantastic. Grab my slides and share them. Very good, Amanda. Just hold on one second, make sure the slides turn up. Everything cooperating. Looks good.
Looks good.
Fantastic. So welcome, everyone. It'd be good to talk with you about this, what seems like an art. It is still an art, probably not a science yet. Please ask questions. Amanda's monitoring the Q&A. If I get stuck at a spot, I want to chime in. Otherwise, we'll have plenty of time towards the end. For this, I do have a little bit of background. Amanda just hit all of it. I also teach over in the McCombs Business School now, which is my current new venture for myself. So that's been fun trying to grow that way. Otherwise, my day job most of the time at the University of Texas is with the LaunchPad. We're part of the undergraduate studies dean, and so we get to work with students from across the entire campus. And we're actually, specifically focused on trying to find students that have traditionally not had support from entrepreneurship programs. And so if you're joining us from one of the other colleges across campus that doesn't have the infrastructure and support like McCombs does, the LaunchPad can be a great resource for you. The other part is if we range our support from students who are just kind of curious about entrepreneurship, the skills, all the way if you've already raised money or funding or starting to scale up. That's where our SEAL Accelerator program is particularly impactful. So wherever you are in that journey, please come engage with us if you're seeking some more support across campus. So big question, what is a business model and how do you pick one? So a business model for me, I looked up some definitions. Most of them I found useless, and really I had to go look up the words in the definition. And so here's my approach, what I think about a business model. It's this kind of intersection of all these different dynamics in your business and in your customers and in the industry. You want to understand how the customers experience the problem you're trying to solve or the benefit you're trying to offer them, how you price and make money against it. What kind of sales marketing efforts does it take to get those customers, the talent pool that you need to build your company and provide that value to the customers. And of course, financing. Some startups, some companies don't need any outside funding, but many times the type of funding that's available to you and when it's available to you may dictate your business model as well. So the challenge is, how do you take all these different aspects and line them up in a way that is internally coherent, they're reinforcing, that makes sense with each other? Because if you get one of them out of alignment, it'll cause friction, it will cause problems, and eventually break one of the other components. And so the journey to get there is, you probably aren't going to solve this on day one. It takes a while to figure this out. Getting to product market fit alone is hard, and then kind of evolving into a business model that makes sense and is efficient and works internally is another big journey after product market fit. So what I want to do is make this short and simple, because obviously the one model, everything should be as a service. The number of startups I've seen pitched as just garbage word, whatever, as a service, and they think that's the right answer. And it's, in some cases it is, but almost never. So be more thoughtful about the right business model than something as a service. And in reality, to me, as a service is a business model, but it really started off as a pricing mechanism. It's kind of where it started, and it's grown into much more sophisticated since then. So what we're going to do today is, so I want to give you some deeper insights on why it's so hard to line those things up. And so for each one of those aspects that we kind of talked about, here's an example of how and why it gets complex underneath it. So you think about your customer problem. When you're thinking about a software as a service business, that means the problem is not one time, it's an ongoing need that they have. And so understanding the nature of that problem. Is it random or is it predictable? If your customer is going to have to come engage your product or service at random intervals, that has probably different implications for lots of part of your business versus if it's just a standard, every so often, like going to the grocery store or filling up a tank of gas. Those are kind of very predictable in the macro sense, ways to do that. The one that gets really challenging for a lot of businesses, and I see a lot of startups, particularly in the climate space right now, trying to solve this, is the problem is spread out across, and the pain associated with the problem is spread out across a lot of different individuals or businesses. It's not consolidated into one person or one company. And that makes it really hard to figure out, who do you go sell to? How do you price? How do you get that one person to move? Of course, there's other ways that problem can be spread out. Geography is a big challenge. So if you only have a few customers in each city around the US, it has implications for your go-to-market. How are you going to go sell? How are you going to support it? There's lots of cost structure implications on that one, and probably team implications too. Funding, I imagine most folks have spent a lot of time thinking about venture capital or angels, looking into that. Of course, my favorite version of funding is when the customer gives you, pays you revenue, and that's enough to cover all your expenses. That's sometimes really hard to do, particularly for technology or deep tech or intellectual property-based startups. A lot of times you need that upfront funding until you can get to a sophisticated enough product and scale to charge the right amount to make it work. I think I kind of listed them in order. Last one, bank debt, is the hardest one to get. It's probably the cheapest of all those, but it takes a while to grow your business to mature to the point where you can qualify to get bank debt. I think the minimum, a lot of times you hear stated is 3 years. So it takes some time frequently to get there. And last one on the talent pool, just to talk more about this one. Austin is one of the reasons so many people are moving to Austin is because of the talent pool. It is a mix when you think about what you need. Do you need a highly educated, specialized workforce, or is it much more of a broader employee talent pool you could pull from? Regional bench depth. This used to be a problem for Austin. We used to have, as a community, really hard problems recruiting VPs of marketing. And the challenge was, you find a great VP in California, New York, or someplace, and they would want to come join the startup. But if it didn't work out, there wasn't 2 or 3 more opportunities for them lined up. So to get them to move themselves or their families and make that transition was really challenging. And so if you're launching a business and there's not a lot of VPs of marketing in the community, and that marketing is going to be the crux of your go-to-market strategy, that might not be a good fit. That's going to be it's going to be an additional pressure on the type of business and how you build the business. Junior, senior, we see this a lot in kind of local agencies, service businesses. You get a few very experienced senior people And then they pick up a lot of junior new hires and turn them through for 2, 3, 4 years. So that works in a university town, but other towns you may not get that prepared, talented workforce that's younger to just churn through. So that can be a really challenging part dynamic for your business. Liquidity of recruiting. In Austin right now, the recruiting market's absolutely insane. People are being competed over, particularly technical talent, with multiple offers, which is good for you because you can go out and hire them, but it also means all your employees are being targeted. And so you have to think about what are the implications for my business on just being able to recruit and retain the right people. And the last comment is net basis of renewal decline. In Austin, we have the University of Texas. And so that is continuously bringing, 10 to 15,000 new people into the workforce each year, or potentially could be. And other, obviously people are moving to Austin. Other communities, that's not the case. It's actually slowly declining their talent pool. It's not refreshing the way ours is here in Austin. And so there's implications possibly for, for your company and the business model. I'll pause there. I see a couple questions in the chat came through. So the first one is around nonprofits. Second one is around, does it also need customer problems? So the customer problems one is that's where everything begins. Of the sequence of things I laid out, the first one I would spend most time trying to understand is the customer problem. And how do they experience it? What are the costs of it? When and how frequently? All those kind of dimensions of the customer problem. That's kind of the starting point for, I think, all of them. From nonprofits, nonprofits do have a business model. They absolutely do. You don't think of them necessarily that way, but they're trying to solve a problem. They're trying to get funding from grants or from donors or fee for service. That's a revenue type issue. They certainly have a talent pool, same dynamics there. And it's competitive sometimes, particularly on the funding side. And so nonprofits have to understand their business model as much as for-profit startups do as well. So the nonprofit one is increasingly a common conversation. That's a good one. So going through, I want to talk through a few, give examples of business model software or service. Obviously, retail. E-commerce is a little bit different than straight up retail. Retail, you're trying to get people in the door, buy a physical product usually. E-commerce, the go-to-market is different. It's digital promotion, digital advertising, and you may not have you have probably different economics to store your inventory versus if you had a retail store. The cost of inventory is likely very different in those scenarios. You end up with more shipping costs, perhaps. So it puts different pressure on different parts of the business. Manufacturing, extraction, so basically mining or pulling things out of the ground, cutting down trees, all those kind of things. I didn't have a better name for middleman. There probably is a more sophisticated one, but it's distributors, brokers, that's a very unique type of business, volume-based business typically. Marketplaces are all the rage. I see tons of entrepreneurs pitch different kinds of marketplaces. So what I want to do is I picked out a few of these just to talk through the underpinnings of those business models. So we can start to think about it from an entrepreneurial lens of what has to work right versus what it takes to be a startup in that space to see if that business model fits what you're trying to accomplish. So starting with marketplaces. So it really is one of the ones we see the most often. The reasons you use a marketplace as a business model, it's when the search costs are really high for someone to find a product. One of the hard ones to understand is this double coincidence of once. When both sides of something are actively trying to come together, but there's some barrier or friction in between. So if you have both sides are actively trying to figure it out, but can't for some reason, that's a great time to use a business model. One of the early versions was lemon laws of cars. One of the nice things about internet business marketplaces now is all the reviews and transparency. Thanks to Bazaar Voice, they started the momentum on reviews, and now they're everywhere. And so that level of transparency reduces risk, and that can be a large part of the search cost for someone trying to find a solution. So just putting a transparent marketplace up can do that. So the way marketplace works, so the core parts of what makes that type of business model function. You need a critical mass of people on the supply side and demand side. What a critical mass is going to be, there's enough so that whatever the individual on one side is searching for, the unique something, there's likely going to be a provider or demand person on the other side. And that way you can get enough liquid transactions. Liquid market means, there's transactions happening on their own, they're efficient. You as the business don't have to spend incredibly painful amounts of time in there. And it's an easy enough transaction to consummate from both the supplier and purchaser sides that it happens and the marketplace works and transactions start going and building. And one of the ones that can be challenging is over time for how you as the business extract a little bit of value from building this place. Do you charge one side of subscription? So we all know Airbnb or Vrbo, they charge different versions of the host can you be able to buy a subscription, or you just take a cut of every transaction. Those are different ways of doing it. Sometimes the demand side, the buyers are actually the ones that are buying into the marketplace, and the supply side is free. And so you see different versions, but you got to figure out how to extract enough value. And so the implications I want to talk through based on that, that's how that business model works. The reality is for a founder, that means you likely have to cheat to build one side of critical mass. It's so incredibly hard as a founder to be marketing or selling to two very different directions. And because it likely takes two different skill sets, two different types of individuals, different, cycle times and everything. And so a lot of times I see entrepreneurs, they create a partnership to solve one side of the marketplace. It may be a very expensive one for a little while, but it lets them then turn all their attention to the other side to focus on building critical mass on that other part. Funding these is challenging. It takes a lot of capital usually to get to the point where you have critical mass on both sides, transactions are happening all over the place, you're monetizing in a good enough manner on per transaction. And so it takes usually a decent amount of funding to get there. But when you do, it's a winner take most cycle. So you, of course, like Vrbo, Airbnb are the dominant ones in that category, but they both had to raise tons of money. See Uber and Lyft, same kind of marketplace. In Austin, we had a nonprofit basically that tried to compete with those for a while, with Ride Austin, and even at an incredibly efficient operation they created, they still couldn't compete. So it is a winner take most, and just be aware of that if you're going to go down a marketplace avenue. The next one, retail. This one tends to work well when individuals need to come in to check the product because the performance range of products can vary and they need something very specific. Sometimes it's hard to quantify that on purely online. This is changing, of course. I mean, online commerce is up to 25%, 40%, somewhere in that range of retail at this point. There's still massive amounts of retail happen in person. The way the business works, eventually it comes down to dollar per square foot, or if you have a shelf, it's dollar per inch of shelf space, and probably per month is added to that. That's the metric that makes this business work or not. And so every item that you think about, you're always analyzing potential profit margin, against that kind of metric. How fast does it turn over? We all know that restaurants want us to come in, eat dinner, and get out so they can put people at the table again. Same thing happens in every retail situation. Is how long is that item going to sit on the shelf? The faster it moves, the better. Of course, different types of retail businesses have a lot of wide-ranging implications for customer service. One of the things you want to think about is, can you always get the materials? Can you supply and stock your shelves or whatever it is you're selling? That's a big issue. Everyone's learning that the hard way right now on supply chain disruptions. And customers are reacting in different ways in shopping and changing their habits based on supply consistency. So that puts you at risk as a retail business. And the last two are interrelated. Kind of the caveat to having a potentially slow moving or not profitable item is if it actually drives a larger basket of goods. So you really want to understand all the items that get purchased by somebody. And it's okay maybe to have one that is in turn if it drives a large basket of goods, kind of other purchases. And that gives you, you always then of course want to think about lifetime value to customer acquisition cost. Standard metric, even in this business, something that we mostly hear about in software as a service or other kind of software businesses, it matters in this one quite a bit. And so implications, if you want to choose this business model, here are things that you have to be able to figure out and you need to be able to do. How do you create that differentiation to get someone in your place versus anywhere else? Retail is incredibly competitive. It is a hard business to figure out if you're just a Me Too type setup, which you see a lot of folks try different types of branding. That's one way to differentiate yourself. Locations, the cliche. That's one type of differentiation. You have to figure one of them out. Number of things to track: average basket size. Are you retaining customers? Are they coming back in? Or is it really just a one-off transaction and they're good and done for a long period of time? That's a hard business. That's a hard retail business to do. You have to extract a lot of value and continually be attracting new customers. You have to be great at customer acquisition if that's the type of retail business you have. Early on, early profit leaks, for entrepreneurs, they don't fully capture the cost to serve. This is true for every business. And I see a lot of founders, they're the ones putting in equity, long hours, and they don't fully price themselves into the cost to serve customers or fix things. You're taking back product early on. Can you return that up the supply chain and get a refund? Or as a startup, are you just going to get screwed and be forced to eat it because you don't have any leverage? Yet, hopefully you do as you get bigger and more trusted. In retail, of course, it's the people who are on the floor interacting with the customers. Are you able to really attract the right talent and train them and retain them? Or are they going to be turned over so fast, it's going to be a constant nightmare for you, given the talent pool in your local community. That one has a huge implication on retail. So this is my X as a service, software as a service. I'm, everything as a service, whatever. This one, obviously, you use this type of model when there's an ongoing, predictable customer need, when they're going to have their problem again or need opportunity. The other one, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, the cost acquisition dominates the cost of retention. So once you get them in and you sign them up for the subscription, as long as your product is good enough, they're going to stay. And so that's kind of one of the economics of how this business model works. Alluded to it, problem duration needs, and the cost of that problem and the way the customer experiences that cost needs to match with how you're charging for subscription. The length of time, the frequency of your billing, perhaps. If they're buying X units, you get for $100, you get 5 of these things per month, or you can pay $1,000, you get 50 of these things a month. That kind of needs to make sense. And that's kind of aligning the pricing, proof of value, sales process of how do you go acquire someone new? How do you demonstrate that your product solves their problem? Because then you're going to ask them to sign a 1 year or longer contract. And so a lot of, particularly small businesses, large enterprises, they're going to force you to do some type of pilot, some type of proof. What are the implications of that? And that's very much dependent on the type of customer base and the type of product and the cost implications of that. So for the implications, this means if you're going to use this type of business model, it's heavy on go-to-market talent, sales or marketing type individuals. The valuations can be really good, particularly if you start hitting monthly growth targets. Kind of the one I hear right now is 30% month-over-month growth in order to get the massive Series A valuation. That's hard. Particularly, that's just hard to keep up and keep going for a while. Instrument usage and detect churn risk. Because you're so focused on the front end acquiring somebody, what businesses seem to do really well is they put little data metrics and data probes into their product. And this is easier for software, but you can do it other places too. That tracks how a particular customer is using their product or not using it, and sends up alerts that this customer may be at risk of churning. And that's one way to really narrow your focus and expense on just the customers who who need that support, who need that extra love to keep them from churning out and staying a customer, because otherwise you're focused all on acquiring customers. And so it's probably this one tactic you get very efficient on that spend. Last one, manufacturing. I think everyone probably gets manufacturing. This is a good one when it's very predictable that you take the raw materials, you make the finished product. There's very predictable amount of value created when you do that. I spent a lot of time in the oil and gas industry. They call this the crack spread. So when they take a barrel of oil, they run it through their plant, there's about $10 a barrel of profit. And they kind of sort of don't care the price per barrel, because if it's $50 per barrel of oil, they're still going to make $10 once they break apart the carbon chain. If the price is $100, they're still going to make $10 per barrel once they break the carbon chain. It just changes the profitability of that. So given that manufacturing, the things that really matter is utilization rate. You got to keep it up and running, just cranking product through all the time. You have so much fixed costs, you need units to absorb each of those, a little bit of that. And so you see big manufacturing places, just keep the lines going, don't let anything go down. I hear stories about, when Samsung went down in the storm, the price tag per minute that their stuff was offline was insane. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And same thing with auto manufacturers. If they miss a part, suddenly their inventory for whatever part gets used up and the whole line goes down, that can be incredibly expensive. And so everything is designed around just keeping the utilization going. What that means is you end up signing this really long-term agreements on the supply side and also on the sell side, because you have to just have high confidence in the throughput. If you can get that, you can finance the thing with a lot of debt. You can lever up a little bit of equity with a lot of debt, because you have confidence that you're just going to be pushing through product and getting a reliable amount of profit on each unit you get through. And debt investors, of course, like that setup. And manufacturing is really expensive to create a facility and equipment. And so you kind of have to be able to, find a bunch of debt to offset some of the equity investment cost. I think I kind of basically covered a lot of startup implications. Until you have really consistent products, be careful on scaling up manufacturing. Spend more time smaller, doing it in your kitchen, garage, or small batches. There's some local manufacturing places around Austin. Spend more time there before you really start scaling up and buy more equipment. Workforce is a hard one. Hopefully, I imagine a lot of folks know Armbrust Lloyd. He started a mass manufacturing company at the pandemic. He came and talked to my class earlier this year, and his biggest problem was finding a workforce who could work the machines, pack the masks, and do all that. He was saved. It was totally unexpected. They were asking everyone they could find who could come work for them. And turns out when COVID hit, all of the nail salons shut down too. And all of the mostly women who are working there are highly dexterous. And that's exactly what he needed for his workforce. So like that entire workforce serendipitously just moved over to his manufacturing plant. Without that, he would have a very different existence. It would have been much harder to find the right workforce and keep them. So it's unexpected hidden risk inside this business. Investors prioritize distribution, absolutely. Unit economics, that's what they're thinking about, because they need it to be very predictable if they're going to start using debt. So talk through a few of those just as examples to kind of get down into some of the granular parts of which one works, which risks are you being exposed to based on the model that you choose? How do you have to manage it? The core metrics for each business are a little bit different, and it's because each one has a different source of risk and just different source of success as well. And eventually it comes down to which ones can you deal with? Why can you personally and the team you can build around you manage those risks to make sure you can capture the upside to it? And just the last slide here, this does come down to you. If many of you out there are thinking about starting your own business, at the beginning, it is you, and you're thinking about which one works for myself. Once you particularly understand the customer problem, can you recruit the right people? Is it can you set up the repeatable recruiting process the right way, given the type of talent your company would need for that type of business model? Are you personally one who likes to go out and handshake and make the deals? Or because that would be really great for manufacturing. You get a few suppliers, a few people to take all your product off on a regular basis. That might fit your personality. If you somehow have access to a lot of investors, you can start thinking maybe the marketplace is a little more feasible because you need a lot of capital to get it going. This gets very personalized quickly. Do you want to work in a manufacturing facility, or do you want to have like a nice creative office for an agency studio? You want to be downtown? Are you okay being in a smaller city? Do you need to be in a bigger city? Do you want to be rural? Like all those things kind of in the end play into this. And the one that a lot of folks struggle with, or they start with, of I want to be rich and I want to own an island and have a bunch of private jets flying around. Okay, if that's your goal, you got to think about which business can really scale fast enough, and how do you get the business to that place? Or are you really trying to build something that you own and operate and creates profits, enough profits so you can take care of your family, send your kids to college, maybe have a vacation home or two? There are a lot of businesses that can create plenty of wealth on that front. So that's it. I see some chat and Q&A popping up. Very good. So I'm gonna pull both those windows up and try to work through it. So on the Q&A, can you switch business models once launched? Clear the answer, yeah, that's called a pivot. I rarely see someone pivot the entire business model. Normally, I see someone change their go-to-market strategy, so they switch from sales to marketing, or they realize they start with sales and then they're going to bring on a distributor or a channel partner. I normally see those kind of pivots. When you're going completely from manufacturing to retail, that's a different company. That's probably something bigger happened to cause that type of change. So that's a good one. Bill, hey Bill, good to see you. How much of a hit is technology competition? You're no longer unique with technology, or a better technology has come on board. Yeah. And so it depends on what role technology has in your business. A lot of times product just has to be good enough to meet the feature of your business model. Sometimes technology is everything, and that's the only thing that enables you to differentiate yourself, to get out there. And so if someone comes that's bigger or better, then yeah, it matters. We've seen plenty of situations where better products have lost out to better business models, though. Dell here locally, Salesforce, those are a couple examples that innovated a little bit on the business model. Maybe didn't have a better product, but was able to change the business model, so the technology wasn't as important in that case. So Louise, B2B to C models, yes. So key aspects of that business model, so think about the first thing you need to understand, as starting off as an entrepreneur, understanding the end customer, the end user problem space really, really well. And then you kind of back into who's that B that's in between you, and what role do they play in your business system that you're building up to. And so so for me, the key aspects are really just customer intimacy on the very end, and then be able to sign the right business deals with that interim partner who gets you to that end customer. The classic version is the distributor, right? So you make a product, a distributor takes it, puts it in retail, the retail sells it to the end customer. There's 3 B's in there instead of just 2 in your case. Those are all still relationships, and you monitor and make those deals. It's about pushing product through that interim partner and the profitability that you drive them. One of the questions you should always ask is, if your partner has a sales force that's going out to visit customers, what else are they selling, and how to make sure you're kind of one of the top 2 or 3 or 4 products that they're pushing. if the list of products or services they're trying to sell to the end customer is really long and you're at the bottom, you're never going to get airtime. It's critical to make sure you're higher up. So anonymous attendee. So how do you start to select a business model for your from an idea? Customer problem. Start there. Understand the how the customer experiences the problem, and that means a lot of different things. You know, is it direct financial cost? Is it time cost? Is it frustration? You know, is it impacting a person? You know, I heard this a bunch in technology. You know, does a current product keep someone on staff on call all weekends and having to miss their kids' soccer games and stuff like that? So understanding the customer problem almost down to the person that is experiencing that problem inside that company, or the person who's a consumer, understand that context is the first place to start. And then, you know, look at how are they solving that problem or not solving it. You can see them try different sources of solutions and understand why those products or services didn't solve their problem. Why did your target customer not continue to go down that path? And that will inform maybe an aspect. You could use a similar business model, or you could change it up or come at it from a very different direction. So that's kind of the first places I would start to pick the business model. So Megan, you're asking successful marketplaces started via bootstrapping. I think Etsy started off for a while. Eventually, it's so let me phrase this. The online software ones eventually almost all take a ton of money. The exception maybe is Wikipedia. It still kind of fundraises in a different way, but it bootstrapped for a while. Same with Craigslist. It was bootstrapped and he just hustled for a bit. Otherwise, you can see physical ones. The farmer's market, you could bootstrap-ish a farmer's market. Eventually, you probably want to have some money to invest in it, just to make it better, more formal, and improve the throughput and recruiting and stuff, or have a better location. But there's plenty, you know, offline, simpler marketplaces that you could bootstrap. So how should you respond if you're not, if you don't appear to be one of the winners in a winner-take-all market? And so that's a great question. It's a hard one, and it's a frustrating one. If y'all know, there's a company called Foursquare, which, you know, was early in the check-in space, you know, 12 years ago. And they were leading and doing awesome. And then Facebook turned on the same feature. And for some reason, the CEO of Foursquare was at the event that where Facebook announced it. And he tried to put on a good face. He got interviewed, and you can see he's like, "Oh shit, what do I do?" This behemoth of Facebook just decided to enter my markets. Like, that's always one of the questions. In terms of, like, they shifted the business. They're selling. It's very much a B2B business. We're selling data about foot traffic, as opposed to much more consumer facing. So they pivoted that, and I believe they're still up and running this much time later. So kudos to them for figuring out how to make that shift. Bill, another hit is technology needs to be important. Yeah, so interesting comment, Bill. So this comment is that the technology doesn't always have to be better, and you see this all the time. You know, the old cliche is you don't get fired for buying Big Blue, which is IBM. Obviously, that's not the case anymore. But, you know, Oracle, you know, companies like that, and Dell, they don't have the best technology, but they have served and they delivered trusted solutions to these big companies for such a long time that it's really hard to go in, even with a better product or technology, and displace them, because they just own the channel, they own the customer relationship, and they have such embedded inertia inside those big companies that it's more about that than it is about the technology. And by the way, some aspect of the pharmaceutical business is that it's how good are you at pushing whatever drug you come up with through your sales chain, marketing chain, to get it into doctor's offices to write prescriptions, or into hospitals to give it to the patients. That's almost as important. Investing in that distribution pipeline is almost as important as the underlying R&D of the new drug. Cool. Thanks for covering the recording, Amanda. So Megan, coming back to LaunchPad offer advising to graduate students. Yes. And we are actively looking for any student across campus. So please, go sign up on Startup Tree is the platform we use, and you can request mentor office hours from a lot of different mentors we have posted on our website. We are agnostic between undergrads and grads in any part of the university. And if there's faculty watching, please come reach out as well. We did launch a faculty entrepreneurship program, a grant program this last year. And so we're here to support faculty on their journey from kind of initial curiosity all the way through. Which business model is most widely used? My guess is retail. Think about all this retail or service business is one of those two. Just think about all, drive up and down any road here, how many businesses are lined up in there, or fronts for, when I say mom and pop, it's really just small owner operator business. Yes, Megan, I'm one of the mentors on Startup Tree, so you can request office hours with me. I think I have them reserved every Thursday from 1:30 to 3:30. But let me know if that works. And same is true for most of the other mentors who are on there. They can probably accommodate a slightly different time if needed. And it looks like we cranked through all the questions. That was great.
Super helpful. Oh, looks like another one just came in. Which model is the most difficult to navigate?
It's the one that doesn't fit the customer problem. It's like when you're trying to force something on, like, oh, I really want to do this. And you kind of have to ask the entrepreneurs why. Like, why are you trying to come at it with this? And a lot of people go, oh, I want to do a marketplace. Like, no, marketplace is a specific tool and tactic for a specific situation. When there's two sides that really want to do something, and boom, drop it in the middle. And so the marketplace one actually is incredibly hard. Manufacturing one is a little bit easier to start small and get big, but that journey takes a long time. And it's hard to find the right customer segment who can absorb higher prices early on. I'm not sure the business model selection is going to be the hardest part of your entrepreneur journey. Just congrats to your founder. This is going to be hard no matter what you do.
Yeah.
Business model, best match for your business. It's kind of one of those things where you know it when you see it. When you're just constantly fighting every single direction, and people are just beating you up, and you're losing on each front. You don't have something isn't the right business model. You need to pivot part of it. Look at your competitors. Which business models are they using? What from your customer's perspective, what has worked about that business model versus not worked about that business model? That's a great way to figure out if you're replicating the same errors or successes, or if you need to come at it from a different direction.
Bart, I think I would ask a question to kind of wrap this up, which is sort of two parts. For students that are sort of just kind of getting started in this exploration of business models and all of that, what are sort of the biggest mistakes you see them make when they're initially kind of evaluating and selecting the business model? And then are there some additional resources on this topic that you might recommend to our attendees interested in diving into this in more detail?
Yeah, the first mistake I see a lot of entrepreneurs, a student or anybody, is they see a really big funding announcement. Like, so-and-so raised $10, $50 million, $100 million, or this company's worth $1 billion unicorn. I want to do everything exactly as they did, or they say we're Uber for this, and you're like, well, that's maybe not the right thing, and people just get sucked in by the sexiness and the excitement of that. That's the first thing. And my response is always like, cool, great, go spend a lot of time with the customers, understand if that makes sense to them or not. That's always one of the biggest challenges. As far as where to go about this, there's not a lot of places. It ends up being lots of conversations with other entrepreneurs. One of my frustrations, at the UT McCombs Business Club, an MBA from the place, no one sat down and ever listed out the 10 top business models and how they work. No one taught us that, which seems like kind of the core thing that should happen at some point in the business school. And so it's hard. Some HBR, Harvard Business Review stuff has probably been written on it. There's probably some books out there. That's my first answer, but it also is my homework assignment to come back with a couple better choices.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was super helpful. I know I learned a lot. I feel like our attendees did as well. So I really appreciate you taking a little bit of your time to join us. Thank you to all of our attendees for joining us. And we will be sending an email out to our attendees likely after Thanksgiving at this point, but that will include the recording to today's workshop. So thank you, Bart, so much for being here, and I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.